Amelia Cole lived the kind of life most people only dreamed about. At 30 years old, she was the glowing, graceful wife of billionaire businessman Ethan Cole. Her baby bump, now 8 months along, only added to the gentle softness she carried, like a portrait of strength wrapped in vulnerability. From the outside, everything about her life seemed perfect. Social media was flooded with pictures of them smiling on red carpets, boarding private jets, or hosting charity galas in their sprawling New York penthouse. The tabloids called them the power couple of the decade, and fans adored Amelia for her warmth, charity work, and elegance. Ethan, tall and commanding with a chiseled jawline and tailored suits, was the image of a devoted husband and self-made tycoon. Together, they looked unstoppable. But what the world didn't see was what happened behind closed doors. Over the past few months, Amelia had begun to feel a growing chill in their relationship. Ethan had become distant, distracted, emotionally unavailable. He no longer looked at her the way he used to, like she was the center of his universe. Conversations were short, often replaced with cold silence or abrupt excuses. He missed doctor's appointments, forgot milestones in the pregnancy, and when she brought it up, he dismissed her concerns with a casual wave or blamed his workload. What Amelia didn't yet know was that someone else had begun filling that emotional space in Ethan's life. Her name was Vanessa Blake, his 25-year-old assistant. Intelligent, fiercely ambitious, and stunning in a way that turned heads without effort, Vanessa had entered their lives like a gentle storm. She was always around, meetings, dinners, even weekend trips. Amelia had her suspicions, but Ethan always insisted Vanessa was just staff. In truth, Vanessa was more than just an assistant, she was a woman who knew what she wanted. And what she wanted was Amelia's life. Vanessa Blake had never known the comfort of stability. Orphaned at the age of 10, she was tossed between foster homes and group shelters across the outskirts of Chicago, learning early that no one gave you anything unless you took it yourself. She grew up watching others get adopted, cute girls with soft eyes and sad stories, while she learned to mask her pain with a smile sharp enough to slice through pity. At 16, she realized the power she held over people, especially men, when she leaned into charm and confidence. With a steel wool and silver tongue, Vanessa clawed her way into elite circles, taking part-time jobs, studying business online, and eventually landing an internship at one of Ethan Cole's subsidiaries. It was there she first laid eyes on the billionaire, charismatic, poised, and clearly a man used to being worshipped. Vanessa was captivated not just by Ethan's wealth but by the life he represented, power, influence, and the kind of security she'd never had. And standing beside him was Amelia, the woman who had everything Vanessa had ever dreamed of. From the beginning, Vanessa played the long game. She started subtly, complimenting Ethan's leadership, listening intently to his frustrations, and always finding the perfect moment to agree with him. She made him feel seen, validated, admired in a way that fed directly into his ego. Where Amelia encouraged Ethan to slow down and connect emotionally, Vanessa admired his ruthlessness. Where Amelia questioned his absence, Vanessa celebrated his dominance. The contrast between the two women was intentional. Vanessa whispered poison into Ethan's ear, planting seeds of doubt about Amelia's loyalty, emotional stability, and even the paternity of the unborn child. "She's changing, Ethan," Vanessa once said with a concerned tone, her eyes wide with sincerity. "I know pregnancy is hard, but sometimes I wonder if she really understands you anymore." Vanessa made herself indispensable. She scheduled his meetings, handled last-minute crises, and always anticipated his moods. She started dressing more boldly at the office, tight skirts, silk blouses with one button too low, perfume that lingered on his suits long after she left the room. Ethan, flattered by the attention and slowly growing distant from his wife, began leaning on her more. Vanessa became the one he called late at night when he was frustrated. She knew when to offer silence, when to laugh, and when to drop a gentle hand on his shoulder. It wasn't long before business dinners turned into private ones. And from there, quiet hotel rooms where guilt was drowned in lust and lies. What began as seduction soon became obsession. Vanessa didn't just want Ethan, she wanted everything Amelia had. She studied Amelia's movements, her style, her routines. In her mind, Amelia was an obstacle, one that needed to be removed. Slowly, quietly, Vanessa replaced her in Ethan's world. With each passing day, she moved closer, bolder, more present. And Amelia, unknowingly, was being pushed to the edge of a carefully planned fall. Amelia had always believed that love, real love, could withstand anything. But as the weeks of her pregnancy passed, she couldn't ignore the ache in her chest that came not from physical discomfort, but from emotional abandonment. Ethan, once attentive and affectionate, had become a stranger in their own home. He no longer touched her belly in wonder, no longer asked about the baby's kicks or her cravings. He missed 2 consecutive doctor appointments without calling, offering only vague excuses about urgent board meetings or travel delays. When he was home, his eyes were always on his phone, his replies clipped and indifferent, as if her presence had become a silent inconvenience. She tried to understand, told herself he was just under pressure from his growing empire, that the stress of upcoming mergers and media scrutiny could break even the strongest minds. But no matter how she rationalized it, the truth remained: Ethan wasn't just distracted, he was pulling away. Late at night, Amelia sat alone in the nursery, folding tiny baby clothes, wondering why she felt more alone now than she had in her entire life. Her once warm and playful husband had grown cold and distant, like a man who had made a decision he hadn't yet spoken out loud. One afternoon, Amelia met her best friend Linda at a quiet cafe in Midtown. Linda had been her rock since college, brutally honest, fiercely loyal, and never one to ignore red flags. As Amelia sipped her chamomile tea and tried to mask the tremble in her voice, she confessed, "It's like I'm invisible. He's always at work, always with that assistant of his." Vanessa. The name hung in the air like poison. Linda's eyes narrowed with immediate suspicion. Vanessa? The one with the red lipstick and sky-high heels? Amelia nodded, already knowing what Linda was about to say. "Look, I'm not trying to scare you," Linda began gently, "but where there's smoke, there's usually fire. And you've been choking in smoke for weeks." The words hit Amelia harder than she expected. She had been trying so hard to hold everything together, to ignore the shift in Ethan's gaze, the half-hearted hugs, the way he never quite met her eyes anymore. But now, someone else was saying it out loud. Someone she trusted. "Do you think he's..." She couldn't finish the sentence. Linda reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "I think you need to stop making excuses for someone who's stopped showing up. You're 8 months pregnant, Amelia. You shouldn't have to beg your own husband to care." Tears welled up in Amelia's eyes, but she blinked them back. In that moment, she realized something was truly broken. Not just in their communication or routines, but in Ethan himself. The man she married, the man who once kissed her forehead every morning and painted nursery walls with her, was gone. And in his place stood someone colder, unreachable, and possibly hiding secrets darker than she dared imagine. Amelia had spent weeks trying to silence the gnawing suspicion in her gut, clinging to hope, replaying every tender moment from the early days of their marriage as if those memories could drown out the growing silence between them. But no matter how many excuses she made for Ethan, no matter how many times she told herself he was just stressed or overworked, the truth had started to whisper louder than her denial. It was in the way he lingered on his phone late at night, in the way his eyes flickered with guilt when she asked about his schedule, in the way he stiffened when she mentioned Vanessa. And then, one Thursday evening, it happened. Ethan claimed he had an emergency business dinner that couldn't be rescheduled. Something in his tone was too rehearsed, too indifferent. When he kissed her forehead goodbye, it felt like a formality, not affection. Alone in the penthouse, Amelia stared at the clock, her instincts screaming louder than ever. Without giving herself time to talk herself out of it, she grabbed her coat, called for the driver, and asked him to quietly follow Ethan's GPS tracker, something she only used in case of emergency. Her heart pounded in her chest as they drove through the city streets, every passing light flashing across her face like fragments of truth she didn't want to see. The car slowed near a rooftop restaurant, exclusive, romantic, and definitely not the setting for a business meeting. Peering through the tinted windows, Amelia's breath caught in her throat. There he was. Ethan. Sitting at a candlelit table, laughing in a way she hadn't seen in months. And across from him, leaning in close, her hand gently resting on his, was Vanessa. Dressed in a sleek black dress with her hair curled just right, she looked every bit the part of the woman Amelia had feared she was becoming. The two were so intimate, so unguarded, that for a moment, Amelia felt like a stranger looking in on someone else's life. It wasn't just dinner. It was a date. One with lingering stares, soft touches, and unspoken promises. Her heart shattered. Later that night, when Ethan finally returned home, Amelia was waiting in the living room, tears threatening to spill but her voice steady. "Where were you?" she asked, her hands cradling her swollen belly protectively. Ethan paused, clearly not expecting the confrontation. "I told you, I had a meeting," he said flatly. "I saw you, Ethan," Amelia replied. "I followed you. I saw you with her. Laughing. Touching. Like I never existed." There was a brief flicker of panic in his eyes, but it was quickly replaced by something worse, dismissal. "You're 8 months pregnant, Amelia. You're hormonal. You're imagining things." His tone was cold, condescending, as if she were a child throwing a tantrum. "Vanessa is just someone I work with." Amelia stood frozen, staring at the man she had once trusted with her life. He walked past her, shrugged off his jacket, and headed into the bedroom. No apology. No explanation. Nothing. And then, just after midnight, she heard the front door open again. She got up and peeked through the curtains. Ethan was getting into a waiting car, the same driver who had brought him home. He didn't even say goodbye. He didn't come home that night. And Vanessa had won another round. Vanessa had always believed she could control any situation, twist any reality in her favor with just the right words, the right look, the perfect lie. But as Amelia's pregnancy neared its final stretch, a dangerous fear began to grow inside her. That baby, innocent and unborn, was her biggest threat. With every day that passed, Ethan was drawn back toward his wife, even if just slightly. Vanessa saw it in the way he hesitated before ignoring Amelia's texts, in the guilt that flickered in his eyes when she talked about the nursery, or the way he occasionally mentioned the baby's future. No matter how deep her claws were in him, that child was a living bond between Ethan and Amelia. A tie Vanessa could never replace. She knew then that as long as Amelia was still in the picture, still pregnant, Ethan would never be fully hers. So she sharpened her strategy. She no longer acted like the understanding mistress. Instead, she planted seeds of doubt directly into Ethan's mind. It started subtly, over expensive dinners and soft pillow talk in hotel rooms. "Are you sure she was faithful, Ethan?" she asked one night, tracing her finger along his arm. "I mean, you two were going through so much. And you told me things weren't good between you even before the pregnancy." Ethan scoffed at first, brushing it off, but Vanessa kept going, little by little, like a poison drip. "You don't think it's odd that she suddenly got pregnant just when things were falling apart?" she whispered in his ear one night. "Some women do that, you know, trap men." Ethan didn't want to believe it, he didn't even fully accept it, but doubt, once introduced, is rarely ever fully removed. Vanessa could see it working. Ethan became more distant from Amelia than ever. He started questioning things more often, missing more appointments, coming up with excuses for why he couldn't be there. And with each victory, Vanessa's obsession with removing Amelia grew stronger. It wasn't just about love anymore, it was about survival. Her survival. Her place in Ethan's empire. She had fought too hard and come too far to lose now. The baby was the last thread holding Ethan back, and Vanessa knew it. She had to cut it. At first, the thought of harming Amelia seemed like an abstract idea, too extreme, too dangerous. But as her jealousy festered into rage and her ambition burned hotter, that line began to blur. She convinced herself it was necessary. After all, Amelia had been the intruder. Amelia had the life Vanessa deserved. And now, with Amelia so physically vulnerable, it was the perfect time. Vanessa began watching Amelia's routines. She knew when she was home alone, when the house staff left for the evening, which areas of the mansion had no cameras. She calculated every move with precision. One morning, as she stood in front of the mirror applying lipstick, Vanessa stared at her reflection and said out loud for the first time, "She has to go." The woman looking back at her wasn't the orphan girl who once craved love. She was a predator now, one who had tasted luxury and wasn't about to let it slip through her fingers. Removing Amelia wasn't just a desire, it had become her mission. And in her twisted mind, it wasn't murder. It was self-preservation. The sun was barely beginning to rise when Ethan wheeled his luggage through the foyer, offering Amelia a quick kiss on the cheek that felt more like an obligation than affection. "It's just a quick trip," he muttered, barely making eye contact. "I'll be back by tomorrow night." Amelia, now visibly worn and heavy from carrying their child, managed a nod. She no longer tried to fight the coldness. She had grown used to it, expected it, even. Watching him walk out the door, suitcase in hand and phone already glued to his ear, felt like the 1,000th time she'd been left behind. By noon, the mansion was unusually quiet. Most of the staff had taken the afternoon off. Amelia had insisted on it, wanting a few hours of peace to rest. The silence settled heavily around her as she sat in the sunlit nursery, folding tiny onesies and rubbing her belly gently, whispering to the life inside her. She was startled when the doorbell rang. No visitors were expected, and Ethan hadn't mentioned anyone stopping by. Slowly making her way to the front door, she opened it to find Vanessa standing there, flawless as ever, wearing a silk blouse, red lipstick, and that familiar, smug smile. "I thought we could talk," Vanessa said sweetly, holding a small box of herbal tea in her hands like it were a peace offering. "I know things have been tense between us." Amelia's body tensed instantly. "Ethan's not here," she said, her voice flat. "I know," Vanessa replied, her smile unfazed. "That's why I came." Against every instinct screaming inside her, Amelia stepped aside. The rules of civility still had a hold on her. She didn't want a scene, not while heavily pregnant, not while alone. They moved into the living room, where Amelia stayed standing, her arms crossed protectively across her belly. "Say what you came to say," she said, her patience already thin. Vanessa took a slow breath, putting on her best performance. "I know this isn't easy for you," she began, "but you and Ethan have been drifting apart for a long time. I just want you to accept reality. He's not in love with you anymore." Amelia's jaw clenched. "You're delusional if you think I'm going to stand here and let you rewrite my marriage." Vanessa laughed lightly, but there was venom beneath the sound. "Come on, Amelia. You're just a chapter he's already finished reading." The words stung sharper than she expected. "Get out," Amelia said, voice shaking but firm. "Now." Vanessa stepped closer. "You think that baby is going to keep him? You think he'll stay because of a child he's not even sure is his?" "I said get out." Amelia's voice rose, raw with emotion, her hands trembling as she pointed toward the door. But Vanessa didn't move. Instead, she stepped even closer, her face a mask of twisted satisfaction. "You're nothing but a burden to him now. And soon, you'll just be a memory." Amelia turned to walk away, her heart pounding, adrenaline spiking. She wanted to get upstairs, to lock herself in her room and call someone, anyone. But as she reached the grand staircase, she felt the chill of Vanessa's presence behind her. She turned slightly, just enough to see the gleam in Vanessa's eyes, a flash of something feral, unhinged. And then it happened. With a sudden, violent shove, Vanessa pushed her. Amelia's world tilted in slow motion. Her feet lost grip, her arms flailed as gravity claimed her. She tumbled down the hardwood stairs, her body twisting, landing hard against the cold steps. A sharp, searing pain tore through her abdomen as her body came to rest at the bottom of the staircase. For a moment, the world went silent, then came the scream. A raw, guttural cry of agony and terror that echoed through the empty mansion. Blood was spreading quickly beneath her. Her hands gripped her belly instinctively, panic overtaking her as she sobbed, gasping for air, for help, for a miracle. Vanessa stood at the top of the stairs, frozen, her breath shallow and rapid. Her face was pale, but her eyes didn't show remorse, only fear of being caught. Slowly, she descended a few steps, watching Amelia writhe in pain. "You slipped," she whispered to herself, rehearsing her lie. "You slipped, and I tried to help." But Amelia saw her. Heard her. And despite the pain, the blood, the blinding fear for her unborn child, she burned Vanessa's face into her memory. The last thing she saw before darkness pulled her under was that cold, calculating stare, and the realization that Vanessa had meant to kill her. The house remained silent, save for the faint, anguished sounds of Amelia's sobs, echoing through the marble halls as her world bled red at the foot of a staircase that would never be the same. The front door creaked open slowly, and the sound of Ethan's expensive leather shoes echoed through the marble hallway as he stepped inside the mansion much earlier than expected. His flight had been cancelled due to weather, and instead of calling ahead, he decided to surprise Vanessa. He imagined her still there, maybe in his study or upstairs waiting for him. What he didn't expect was the chilling sight that greeted him as he turned the corner into the foyer. There, sprawled at the bottom of the grand staircase, was Amelia, his pregnant wife, lying in a growing pool of blood. Her hair was matted to her face, her dress torn from the fall, her arms trembling as they clutched her swollen stomach. She was barely conscious, her face twisted in agony and fear. Standing above her, halfway down the staircase, was Vanessa. Her silk blouse was rumpled, her cheeks flushed, and her wide eyes filled with crocodile tears. "Ethan!" Amelia cried out the moment she saw him, her voice ragged with pain. She pushed me. She did this." Her voice cracked as she pointed a shaky finger toward Vanessa. "She tried to kill me, our baby." Vanessa gasped, as if wounded by the accusation. "No. Ethan, no, that's not what happened," she said quickly, rushing to the bottom of the stairs and kneeling beside him. "She slipped, I was trying to help her. I swear." Her voice trembled just enough to sound believable, and her eyes locked onto Ethan's, begging him to believe her. "You know how emotional she's been lately. She's been accusing me of things for weeks." Ethan stood motionless for a few seconds, the weight of the scene pressing down on him. He looked at Amelia, bloody, broken, desperate, and then at Vanessa, breathless and teary-eyed, her hand resting gently on his arm. Two women. Two versions of the truth. But only one choice. Amelia's eyes met his, full of disbelief and hope that he would do what was right. "Ethan, please," she begged, her voice growing weaker. "She pushed me, the baby, he's not moving. I need help, please." Ethan took a step forward. Then stopped. And turned away. Without a word, without a single glance back, Ethan pulled his arm away from Vanessa's grip and began walking toward the kitchen. Amelia's voice broke as she screamed after him, her body racked with pain and betrayal. "Ethan! Help me! Ethan, please! Don't leave me like this!" But he kept going, his footsteps steady and heartless. He reached the phone on the wall and pressed a button. "Get an ambulance to the house," he said coldly. "There's been an accident." His voice was flat, detached, like he was ordering dinner. Then he walked past Vanessa and Amelia again, this time not stopping at all. He didn't kneel beside his wife. He didn't ask if the baby was alive. He didn't question what really happened. He simply walked out the front door and into the waiting car where Vanessa soon joined him, dabbing her eyes with a silk handkerchief, whispering, "I was so scared." Inside the mansion, Amelia lay gasping for air, her body torn by pain, but nothing hurt more than watching the man she once loved choose silence. Choose her enemy. Choose betrayal. Ethan Cole hadn't just walked away from his wife that day, he had walked away from his child, his vows, and every shred of humanity he once had. The piercing siren of the ambulance shattered the silence of the early evening as it sped through the city streets, carrying Amelia's broken body toward the hospital. Her vision blurred with tears and blood, her fingers still clutching her belly as if trying to hold on to something that was already slipping away. The paramedics worked quickly, voices calm but urgent, trying to stabilize her vitals. Through it all, Amelia drifted in and out of consciousness, whispering prayers, calling out for Ethan, begging the universe not to take her baby. By the time they wheeled her into the emergency room, her body had already begun to shut down from the trauma and blood loss. Doctors surrounded her, barking orders, nurses rushing in with IVs and equipment. The brightness of the sterile lights above her blurred into one long beam, and somewhere in the noise, she heard the cold, clinical word that shattered her world: miscarriage. She woke up in a dim recovery room hours later, her body numb, her heart crushed beneath a weight heavier than any injury. A kind-faced nurse stood by her side, gently checking her monitors. Amelia's lips parted, barely able to speak. "My baby." The nurse paused, eyes softening. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "You're lucky to be alive. It was a very bad fall." But Amelia didn't feel lucky. She felt hollow. She felt like a grave. She waited for Ethan, convinced that once he realized the gravity of what happened, he would come running through those hospital doors. But the minutes turned to hours. The sun began to rise again. Still, he never came. No flowers. No calls. No sign that he cared. She had lost the very thing that was supposed to bind them forever. She stared out the hospital window, her hand resting where life once kicked and moved and grew. The room felt unbearably quiet, the absence of that little heartbeat echoing louder than any machine. In her mind, she replayed the fall, Vanessa's cold eyes, Ethan's cruel silence. The baby she had spoken to every night, the one she had picked names for, the one whose tiny clothes she folded with so much love, gone. When the doctor finally came in to discuss her discharge, he placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You're strong, Amelia," he said softly. "You survived something many don't. But take your time to heal." Heal? How do you heal from losing a piece of your soul? How do you recover when the father of your child turns his back on you? Amelia left the hospital with empty arms and a heart heavy with grief. She was no longer the woman who had walked into that home days before. That version of her, the hopeful wife, the glowing mother-to-be, had died on those stairs. All that remained now was a broken woman who had lost everything. And yet, buried beneath the heartbreak, a new fire began to flicker, the will to survive, and eventually, to make them all pay. Linda arrived at the hospital room with a determined look in her eyes, carrying a bouquet of bright lilies and a fierce promise. She had been Amelia's closest friend for years, and the news of the attack and miscarriage had shattered her just as deeply. Seeing Amelia so fragile and broken stirred something powerful inside her, a refusal to let this injustice go unanswered. Sitting beside Amelia's bed, Linda took her hand gently and said, "You're not alone. I promise you, we're going to make sure Vanessa and Ethan face the truth. They won't get away with this." Amelia looked at Linda with tired eyes, her pain palpable, but the smallest flicker of hope sparked in her heart. The idea that someone was fighting for her, that justice might actually be possible, gave her a momentary strength she hadn't felt since the fall. As soon as Amelia was discharged, Linda threw herself into action. She contacted trusted contacts in the mansion's security team and the private investigators she knew from her corporate law firm. Slowly but surely, she began collecting everything: security footage from the mansion's cameras, text messages between Vanessa and Ethan, and witness statements from the house staff who had seen unusual behavior in the days leading up to the incident. The breakthrough came when the security team reviewed footage from a hidden camera position near the staircase, the very spot where Amelia had been pushed. The video was chilling. It showed Vanessa entering the mansion alone, her expression calm but calculating. Amelia and Vanessa were seen arguing, voices rising in anger. Then, without warning, Vanessa's hand shoved Amelia hard, sending her tumbling down the steps. The camera captured Amelia's terrified scream and the shock frozen on Vanessa's face. Linda watched the footage over and over, feeling a mix of anger and vindication. This was the evidence they needed to expose Vanessa's cruelty and Ethan's cowardice. With this undeniable proof in hand, Linda prepared to help Amelia take her fight to the courts. She reassured Amelia that no matter how hard the battle, the truth would come out, and when it did, justice would be served. That spark of hope, ignited by friendship and relentless determination, was the first step toward reclaiming Amelia's life from the darkness that had engulfed it. As soon as the evidence was in their hands, Amelia, with Linda's unwavering support, took the bold step to press charges against Vanessa. The news spread like wildfire. What started as whispers behind closed doors quickly became headlines splashed across every major news outlet. The scandal was explosive, an ambitious mistress pushing a heavily pregnant wife down the stairs, a billionaire husband who stood by silently as his wife bled. Social media erupted with outrage and sympathy for Amelia, and the public was hungry for every detail. The story tapped into deep emotions about betrayal, power, and justice, making it one of the most talked about scandals of the year. The fallout hit Ethan's empire hard and fast. His company, once the golden child of the stock market, saw shares plummet as investors panicked over the negative publicity. Sponsors and business partners scrambled to distance themselves, fearing their brands would be tarnished by association. Rumors of internal investigations and boardroom power struggles leaked to the press, painting a picture of a man whose personal failings were now threatening his professional legacy. Ethan's carefully constructed image of strength and control was crumbling before his eyes, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Meanwhile, Vanessa was taken into custody under charges of assault and attempted murder. The arrest was swift and public, with photographers capturing her handcuffed and escorted from the mansion. Vanessa maintained a cold, defiant demeanor, but the security footage, relentless in its clarity, left little room for doubt about her guilt. The courts set a high bail, but Vanessa's fate seemed all but sealed as the evidence stacked against her. In an attempt to contain the damage, Ethan's legal team reached out to Amelia with a settlement offer. They proposed a large sum of money in exchange for her silence and withdrawal of charges, a common tactic used by the wealthy to avoid scandal and protect reputations. But Amelia, fueled by heartbreak and a fierce sense of justice, refused outright. She wanted the truth to be known, wanted Vanessa held accountable, and wanted Ethan to face the consequences of his betrayal and neglect. Her refusal sent shockwaves through the legal and business communities, signaling that she was not a woman to be bought or silenced. The trial became a media spectacle. On the first day, the security footage was played in court. The room fell silent as the camera captured Vanessa's cold shove, Amelia's desperate screams, and the brutal fall down the stairs. The images were undeniable, raw, and horrifying. Ethan sat in the front row, unable to hide the shame that washed over his face as the public saw the man who had chosen Vanessa over his wife and child. Witnesses testified, house staff, doctors, even some of Ethan's closest associates, painting a picture of a man who had abandoned his responsibilities. The courtroom became a stage for public reckoning, and Ethan was publicly shamed in a way no amount of money or power could undo. By the trial's end, the verdict was clear. Vanessa was sentenced to years in prison, and Ethan's reputation lay in ruins. Amelia emerged not just as a victim but as a symbol of resilience and truth. The billionaire's empire had been ripped apart by the very secrets he tried to hide, proving that no amount of wealth could shield someone from justice when the truth finally comes to light. The aftermath of the trial left Amelia with scars deeper than anyone could see, scars of betrayal, loss, and shattered dreams. But from those painful wounds, something remarkable began to grow. With the settlement money secured from the lawsuit, Amelia made a decision that surprised many. Instead of retreating into silence or seeking a quiet life away from the spotlight, she chose to channel her pain into purpose. She founded a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting women who had suffered abuse, betrayal, and violence, women who, like her, had felt powerless and alone. The foundation provided resources for survivors, from counseling and legal aid to safe housing and educational programs. Amelia poured her heart into the cause, determined to ensure that no woman would have to endure what she had without support. Her story resonated with countless people. Invitations poured in for interviews, conferences, and panel discussions. Amelia's calm strength, her raw honesty, and her refusal to be defined by her tragedy made her a beacon of hope. She traveled across the country, speaking at events about domestic abuse, emotional neglect, and the importance of trusting one's instincts. Her words inspired other survivors to speak out, seek help, and reclaim their lives. Slowly but surely, Amelia transformed from a victim into a powerful advocate and role model. Media outlets began to refer to her as a symbol of resilience, a woman who had taken control of her narrative and used her voice to bring light to the darkest corners of human relationships. She was no longer just Ethan Cole's betrayed wife, she was a leader, a fighter, and a source of strength for others. Each speech, each interview, each foundation event was a step away from heartbreak and a step toward healing. Amelia's rise wasn't just about public acclaim, it was deeply personal. Every time she helped a woman escape abuse or find justice, she felt a little of her own pain ease. She had turned her grief into power, her loss into legacy. And in doing so, she rebuilt not only her life but the lives of countless others who had suffered in silence. From the ashes of betrayal, Amelia had created a future filled with hope, purpose, and unwavering courage. Vanessa's sentencing was swift and decisive. The judge, unmoved by her pleas or excuses, handed down a harsh verdict, 15 years behind bars for assault and attempted murder. As the gavel struck, Vanessa's face remained expressionless, cold, defeated, and stripped of the power she once wielded so effortlessly. The courtroom erupted with whispers, but for many, justice had finally been served. Meanwhile, Ethan's world was collapsing. The stock market crash, the loss of sponsors, and the relentless media scrutiny had gutted his empire. Once a symbol of success and invincibility, his sprawling mansion now felt like a prison, an empty shell echoing with memories of what he had destroyed. Sitting alone in the vast, cold living room, Ethan stared out the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city lights twinkling in the distance but offering no comfort. On the television, Amelia appeared, radiant, composed, and free. She spoke passionately about her foundation, her voice steady as she shared stories of hope and resilience. The woman on the screen was a far cry from the broken wife he had abandoned. She was strength embodied, a testament to survival and rebirth. Ethan's eyes lingered on her image, a bitter taste rising in his throat. For the first time, he truly understood what he had lost. His fortune, his status, and most painfully, the woman who had once been the center of his world. As the camera slowly pulled away from his solitary figure, Ethan whispered into the silence, "I lost everything." The screen faded to black, leaving behind the haunting truth that no amount of money or power can erase the consequences of betrayal and cruelty. Voiceover begins with a quiet, reflective tone. When loyalty is blind, love turns to cruelty. These words echo the painful reality of relationships where trust is shattered by betrayal and emotional abuse. Too often, we see stories like Amelia's, women who give their hearts fully, only to be met with coldness, neglect, and worse, deliberate harm. It's a reminder that love should never be silent suffering, nor should loyalty demand sacrificing your own dignity and safety. Betrayal is not just a moment of infidelity, it's the slow erosion of trust, the whispered lies, and the emotional abandonment that leave deep scars. Emotional abuse can be invisible to the outside world, but its effects are no less real. It isolates, confuses, and breaks down a person's sense of worth. But there is power in recognizing it and standing up. Amelia's story is a call to all who watch: don't ignore the signs, don't accept cruelty disguised as love, and never be afraid to speak out. This video isn't just a story, it's a movement. A movement to support and uplift women who have been silenced by fear, shame, or manipulation. We encourage you to share this video to raise awareness, comment your thoughts and experiences to create a community of support, and most importantly, stand with those who need a voice. Because every woman deserves to be heard, respected, and safe. Remember, sometimes the people closest to us hide the darkest secrets. The ones we trust the most can sometimes watch us bleed without lifting a finger. You never truly know someone until that moment reveals their true nature. So guard your heart, trust your instincts, and never settle for less than respect and love that lifts you up. Thank you for watching. Together, we can shine a light on truth, justice, and healing.